Okay. You know what? Okay, I think most people are. Look at you all. It's not perfect. Gonna be okay. Okay, hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Anthropology 110. So I see I see in the little live chat here people have been saying hi, so That's really cool. Hello to all of you. I think we probably we've got at least half of the class here, maybe a little bit more, and hopefully a few more people will start to filter in the next few minutes. Um, Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking this class. I know that you probably imagined that we would be having this class in person, and of course I kind of did too. Um, but hopefully, if we try to stay well and sort of keep our fingers crossed, we'll be able to meet in a couple more weeks. And so I'm kind of hoping for that. Um, so how should I start this? Okay, well, maybe what I'll start by saying is my name is Mike Metcalf. Some of you know me and have met me before. Others have not. Um, I haven't. I teach a few things at the college. I've been at the college for about 6.5 years, I think. And in that time, I've taught. I started teaching anthropology, and then um, I also teach high school. I teach three high school classes, and I haven't actually taught this class since fall of 2019. Um, Most of what I am these days is a high school teacher, and I just sort of do this anthropology class sometimes. But during the pandemic, I kind of focused on high school, and so this is kind of my first time back at this class in a couple of years. And so hopefully I'm not too rusty. Hopefully it all comes back, but my fingers are crossed on that. Um, yeah, so let's kind of jump into what I have to say for you today. It won't be a full class today. I usually don't like to dive into material too quickly, just because sometimes students are still registering. I also want to give you the option to, if you're um, if you're panicked and you want to leave this class, then I don't want you to have to do too much work, but I'm sure you'll be fine. Uh, Maybe just one word about the format. As far as I'm aware, I think I might be the only instructor using YouTube. I know a lot of instructors are using Zoom. A lot of them are using Teams. I when the pandemic first started, maybe about a year and a half ago, I we kind of we had very short notice to kind of go from an in-person class to an online class. And so at the time, I thought the quickest and easiest thing to do would be to live stream my class on YouTube. And that way, I was fairly certain that most students knew how to use YouTube and how to access it. And so I started doing that, and then I found it kind of worked for me, and I continued to use it. I know it kind of has its limitations because uh, yeah, because first time having a class on YouTube. I know it's a little bit awkward because obviously I can't see you, right? You can only see me. Um, but kind of the impression I got from lots of other instructors is that sometimes people are don't like to turn their cameras on, and I know that there's a number of reasons. People might be sick, or they might just not have done their hair. As you can tell, I did my hair especially for this class. Um, People might have, other people in the background, and there's all kinds of reasons why people might not turn on their cameras. And so I kind of chose to just, go the other way. And so it's a shame that I can't kind of see you right now, but again, hopefully we'll be back in the classroom in a couple weeks, and then I will get to visually see all of you, and I think um, that'll be much easier. But for now, this is what we're this is kind of what we're dealing with. And so, while we're talking here, I know some people are making use of the live chat here, and please do make use of it if you have a question or if you want to say something. Um, I'm using kind of streaming software here, so outside of my field of vision, I can see people's comments and I can see them when they come up. I can even I can even put it up on the screen when people laugh at my jokes. So yeah, so anything, anything that you say here, I can read it as we go, and I can put it up on the screen if I need to or whatever. So that we can do that. Okay, so let's go into what I wanted to share with you today. So this, hopefully, if you're in the right place, this is Anthropology 110. It is kind of the first course in a series of anthropology courses that you can take with us, and you can take at a larger university as well. You can get your master's in anthropology. You can get a PhD in it if you so desire. And so this is kind of the first step. Many people don't go on, of course. They're just fulfilling their course requirements, and of course that's fine. But while you're here, I think you've chosen a pretty interesting class to take. I did, pardon me, I did my undergrad, my bachelor's degree in anthropology, and my master's degree, and half of a PhD in anthropology. So I thought it was really exciting and interesting, and hopefully I can kind of communicate some of that interest and excitement to you, and hopefully, even if you don't choose to go on in anthropology, hopefully you'll learn some things, and hopefully you'll kind of enjoy some of the things that we discover. Um, and I think you will. I think it's a really interesting class, but we'll get there. So, so. Um, what we'll be looking at here is the study of humans and human culture. Okay, and so um, the course, as you may have seen on the syllabus, is kind of broken into about, I think, 7 or 8 units. Um, and they kind of cover aspects of human culture or aspects of the human experience. And so we'll talk a little bit about what human culture is and how it works. And then we'll kind of move on to certain aspects of culture. And so maybe one way you can think, we'll get to this a little bit later, but maybe one way you can think about culture is like a car or a machine, right? And the machine or the car, it has a function, right? It does a thing for us. It carries us down the road. But the car is made up of all kinds of different parts that are working together. And culture is kind of the same thing. Culture does something for humans. It's a tool, and it has different parts, right? And again, those parts kind of work together to do the things that we need culture to do. And so, as you can see here, we'll be talking, blah, okay, we'll be talking about how people get their food. That's an important part of culture, and as we'll see, it's kind of a building block for other aspects of culture. We'll talk about exchange, so how people get what they need, how they trade or buy things. We'll talk about sex and gender and marriage. We'll talk about the family. We'll talk about kinship. We'll talk a little bit about the evolution of humans and how we kind of came to be what we are, which I find really interesting. And I'll try not to dive too deeply into it because sometimes I get a little carried away. Um, but these are just some of the topics that we'll look at in terms of how humans work. Okay. If we look at assessments here, what I have for you is 5 quizzes. Okay. And so the quizzes will be fairly short. They'll be about, um, how do I do them now? I think I do about 4 or 5 short answer questions. And so you'll see what those are like in another few weeks. There'll be 5 of those. Again, they're quite short and they're quite simple. I'll give you an attendance mark for kind of showing up and participating in class. There'll be a very short paper to write. And when I say short, I'm thinking maybe like a page and a half or 2 pages tops. So maybe it'll maybe be a little more like an essay than it will a research paper, but we'll get to that a little further down the line. There'll be a midterm exam in which I do multiple choice questions and some short answer questions, and then there'll be a final exam that's very similar, just a little bit bigger, okay? Now, one thing I'll say to you, and you might have to trust me on this, but I'm laying out these kind of assessments here, and I'm making the assumption that we're going to be able to do this class in person and that we're going to be able to finish it in person as well, okay? And so that's kind of my intention. That's what I hope will happen. And I think there's probably a good chance that it will. The only thing I'll kind of point out here is that if things turn out to not go very well for us, if we wind up being online for a big chunk of the course or maybe for the whole course, if that should happen, I may have to change some of these things just to account for the fact that we're online and we're not in person. If that happens, we'll have a bit of a discussion about um, how things will change and why I'm going to change things the way they are. Um, and you'll kind of have to trust me here, but I will, do everything I can to make sure that we assess your progress in this class fairly and in a way that you kind of have advance notice of, right? So again, I'm making an assumption here that we'll go back into the classroom in a couple weeks and we'll be able to do the rest of the class in person and everything will be fine. But if everything, gets turned upside down, I may have to change some of these things, and but I'll let you know well in advance, and we'll discuss it. We'll talk about it, okay? But as I say, I have my fingers crossed that things are going to go the way that I think we all kind of hope they go. Um, yeah, there's a textbook for this class. It's called Cultural Anthropology. Um, you will need to read. You will need to read this book. Um, I, as a university class, I can't, in the number of lectures we have, I can't kind of fit in everything we need to know. There's just not enough class time, and that's kind of the way that university classes work. The classes meet maybe 2 or maybe 3 times a week, but you are expected to do work and reading outside of class time in order to kind of develop enough knowledge and proficiency. And so you will have to do that. We're going to meet a couple times a week here, but you'll have to spend some time, out of on your own, doing some reading or doing some studying, and this book will be a part of that. Okay, so um, I may or may not reference the book for assignments. I will ask questions from the book for sure. So you will have to read it. Now, that said, I'm not too fussy about how you go about getting your hands on this book. And so when we get back to college, there are I think 2 copies of this book in the library. They're on reserve, so you can't really take them out of the library. You can only read them in the library. You can buy it at the bookstore. Unfortunately, it's not an inexpensive textbook. I don't know how much it is, unfortunately. You can also get access to this textbook online, and I think I included a link to that in the syllabus that's on Moodle. So you can kind of get access to this book in a number of different ways. If you can find someone with a used copy, fantastic. If you want to team up with 2 or 3 classmates and share the cost of it, awesome. Um, I need you to read this book, but I don't necessarily need you to buy it. Sadly, they don't give me a percentage of every book sold or anything like that, so I don't care if you buy it, but you do need to figure out a way to have access to this book. So whether you get an online subscription, whether you buy it, whether you can buy it used from someone else, whether you go to the library and read it there, um, I'm going to leave it up to you. You're all intelligent young people. Um, Team up with other students, whatever you want to do, but you will have to use this book to read and study from. Okay. Um, yeah. So that's my thing about that. Um, Now, the slide I have here on attendance, this is going to be This is going to be a little tricky, right? Because I guess ideally I really want everyone to be there all the time. That is what I want. Unfortunately, that doesn't really work well with the pandemic situation, right? Especially now, we want to make sure that if you are sick, don't come to school. Okay, you're just going to make everyone else sick, and it's going to be worse, right? So if you are sick, let us know, let me know, and then stay home and take care of yourself. Okay, that's the first thing you need to do. If you think you might be getting sick, same thing, right? If you feel, oh, I think I have a little bit of a sore throat today, or my nose is a little stuffy, or whatever you think, if you think that there's a chance that you are not well, you need to stay home and wait until those symptoms go away or until you have a COVID test, right? Because if you come into the college and sit in a classroom with all of us and you are sick, you're going to make the rest of us sick, and then we're going to be in trouble. Okay, so again, I want everyone to be there. If you are not sick and you haven't been exposed to someone with COVID, I want you in class. But we also have to be really careful. We have to take care of ourselves and we have to take care of each other, right? And so if you have symptoms or if you're not feeling well, don't come in, right? And the same thing is going to be for me. If I have a day where, gosh, I just don't feel like I feel like I'm coming down with something, then I'm going to stay home and wait until I know for sure. Okay, because again, we have to protect each other here, and it's going to be a difficult term that way. Okay, so attendance is a little bit, what I have written here is a little bit, hard and fast rule, but really what we need to do is make sure that we're not coming in if we're sick. If you're sick, send me an email, send me a message, let me know so that we can work around these things, okay? Because that's the most important thing right now. Also, sorry, this is my first day back, and so I had two classes this morning, and this is my third one, and so my my voice and my vocal cords are not quite they haven't really been exercised in the past month, so I kind of kind of running out of voice. But by the end of the week, I'll be fine with that. But the first day or two is always tough. Uh, Cheating and plagiarism. I'll talk about this a little bit later. Um, the most important thing is to do your own work. Um, don't copy and paste it from the internet. Don't copy and paste it from someone else. Um, I will probably know. Um, and yeah, do your own work, right? If you need help, ask for help, right? We can talk about this a little bit later once we get to assignments and exams and things. But I want to I want to see your work, right? I want to see what you think. I want to see what you say. I don't want to hear what other people have said, right? So we'll cover that a little bit later, but do your own work. Um, Office hours. So I will probably when we get back onto campus, these will be my office hours here, Tuesday, Friday, 11:45 to 1:15. Um, I might be just a little bit late on that 11:45 because I teach my first two classes across the street, and so I have to get over to the main campus. I'll be on the fifth floor, and I think it's room 550. If you need to come see me, just let me know, shoot me a message. Um, if you need to talk to me while we're still online here, again, send me a message, an email or a Teams message, or a Moodle message, I guess, um, and we'll work something out. Okay, so I can find time to talk to you if it's not during those office hours. Just give me some advance notice, and I'll do that. Um, let's see. Oh, before we get to that, the other thing I'll mention maybe very quickly is do check your college emails. I think you guys are probably getting better or students are getting better at kind of checking their emails. But please do, because that's where we'll communicate information to you about, classes that might switch online, or if I'm not feeling well, I may send you a message saying what's going on. Or so just keep an eye on your email. If you sometimes it's easier just to get an app on your phone. So if you get the Outlook app, or if you get Spark or something like that, that's an easy way to connect it to your college email, so you don't have to keep logging in to check it all the time. Um, so please check your college email. And maybe the last thing I'll say is that um, pretty much everything that we do in this course, I will attempt to provide to you. So the slides here that we're going through today, I'll post those on Moodle for you. If we read articles or things in class, I'll post the articles on Moodle. Um, these live streams will be uploaded to YouTube, and those will be there for you as well. So everything that we deal with in this class will be available to you online, so you can look at it should you be sick, or should something strange happen, okay? Um, and maybe the last thing I'll say is that this is, because I haven't taught this class since fall 2019, I actually haven't been using Moodle um, to sort of communicate with students. And so for the most part, I've been using Microsoft Teams and Outlook and YouTube here, as you can see. And so I'm not as proficient at Moodle as maybe some of your other instructors are. So just be patient with me. I'm kind of learning how to use Moodle as I go. And so if anything looks weird in it, it's because I'm just learning how to do it. So um, I will post things in Moodle, and hopefully that will go well. Um, so before I kind of switch gears here, I just want to give everybody a minute. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask based on what I've said about how the course is kind of organized, or how it's going to go, or um, sickness or anything like that? I'll just give you a minute to put something in the live chat if you do have a question, and if not, I'll move on, but I'll give you a minute. Okay, let's give you 30 more seconds, and then I'll move on. All clear? That's good. Thank you. How's attendance evaluated? Good question. Good question. Um, Usually what I do, yeah, so for attendance, usually what I do, I will take attendance every class to see who's here. Obviously, for the first class or two, it's going to be a little bit tricky because I don't know all of you very well. Um, but I'll keep track of attendance, and I'll also, I will pay attention to your kind of participation and level of engagement. And again, online it's kind of tough. And if we stayed online, I'll rethink it. But once we're in class, I want to see people are engaged and paying attention, and maybe asking a question or answering one here or there. That's what I want to see. And so if you're there, if you're paying attention, if you're involved, then that's great. That's what I want to see for that grade. So it'll be a little bit of, are you physically present? But it'll also mean, are you a part of the class? Are you engaged and involved in it? Okay. Um, so yeah, so the attendance will be that, and then the quizzes, I'll be quizzing you separately. Can we do the quizzes on our own time, or will it be done in class? It will be done in class. Um, Again, if this is, I think, Lovepreet's question. If we, yeah, it will be done in class. If you are sick, or if in 3 weeks' time or so we're still online, I'll come back to that, and we'll work something else out. But if all goes to plan, it'll be in class and you'll sit down and everybody will write at the same time, in theory. Um, okay, so I think that might be all the questions. If you do have another question, you can, whoops. If you do have another question, you can, very welcome, very welcome. Um, if you do have another question, you can type it in there. But I think what I'll do is I'll move on to a little bit about what we'll be talking about. And so to kind of kick this off, I'd like to ask all of you a question. And the question is this: how would you describe a human? So how I want you to think about this is imagine that I'm an alien, okay? I've never been to Earth before. I'm from some crazy planet far away. I'm very strange looking. I don't look like a human being at all. Um, and I've come to this planet for the first time and I've looked around and I see that there's, all kinds of living things, right? There's tiny living things and giant living things, and there's these green things growing everywhere, and there's some living things flying in the sky, and some of them are swimming in the water, and all kinds of all kinds of life. There's life everywhere. Um, but I also see you humans, right? And there's a lot of different living things on this planet, but human beings seem to be quite a bit different from most of the other forms of life that are here. And so that's kind of my question for you as an alien. What makes you guys so special? Why are you humans so different from everything else? Okay. So anything that you can think of, how would you describe a human? What makes humans different from other living things that are on Earth? Just throw it into the live chat and we'll see what we can come up with. So Maya says, oh, are we superior with a question mark? So in some ways, probably yes, right? We're certainly able to do things that really no other animal can do. And so, yeah, there's something going on there. Um, Sukhjinder says, yeah, human is described by his ability to think. Okay. I'd like to hear more about that because what do you mean by think? Because animals can think as well, right? Dogs and cats and horses and whales and chimpanzees, they have thoughts as well, right? But what makes our thoughts different from theirs? Um, Marco here says, highly adaptable, intelligent, conscious beings who are all different and unique in their own way. Yeah, very interesting, right? We are very intelligent, for sure. We are very adaptable, right? So humans are found all around the world in all kinds of different environments and different living conditions, right? That we have figured out how to live in, which is pretty amazing. It's pretty interesting. We are conscious beings, right? So we have a consciousness. Uh, Marco, if you have any ideas about consciousness, I'd be curious too, because that's something that has been difficult for scientists to kind of explain and talk about and describe. But it's true, we are conscious beings, right? We know that we are a certain person, a certain being, and that we're different from others, right? We are all different in some ways. Um, and yeah, we are all different and unique. That's very true. Uh, Arshpreet here says we have quick reactions. Well, some of us do, I think, if I understood you correctly. Um, Dress that makes us different. Yeah, and maybe even the idea that we do dress at all is pretty interesting, right? Not most, no animals wear clothes except for us, right? And again, our clothing is um, quite complicated sometimes and quite varied. Sometimes it's very cultural in nature, but that's part of it. A species with strong mental abilities. Yeah, so there it is again, right? We have a focus on our brains and what our brains can do. And that's probably a logical thing to say, right? Because most of the things that are different about us, most of the things that we do differently from other animals have to do with our ability to use our brains, right? Our ability to think. Um, let's see here. Lovepreet. Lovepreet says we can control the environment. Now, that's an interesting thing too. Um, there are animals that have some degree of control over the environment, but of course, nothing like us, right? We have taken the environment and we have changed it to suit our needs and our wants and our desires and our ideas about what's beautiful and what's not beautiful. We have shaped this world to our own liking, right? And again, there are animals who can influence the environment, but again, nothing like a human being, right? Um, Maya says, yeah, the human brain can work wonders. Um, at some times of the day, when I wake up too early, sometimes I feel like, oh, maybe maybe my brain is not capable of any wonders. But you're very right, Maya. Again, the human brain is remarkable, right? And it's something that sets us apart from other animals. Harandeep says, uh, different genes with their own identical or different personality. Yeah. So humans are our differences are encoded in our genes, in our DNA, and and we share some of those genes, right? So all of you and me, we we all share some genes, but we also have a lot of different ones, right, that account for our biological differences, right? Very true. Lovepreet says, yeah, we have control of most things. We very much do. Um, see, this is Marco says, being conscious is being able to make our own decisions in how we perceive the world. Yeah, well, that's interesting. There's kind of a few things in there, right? Because one of the one of the things in there is that kind of sorry, I'm just uh, answering a quick message here. I apologize. Okay. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Okay. Um, yeah, that's a very interesting thing, right? Is that we have the ability to make conscious decisions, right? We're guided by our instincts, right? But we're not controlled by them. And so that's an interesting thing. And we also have, you know, we can not only perceive the world, but we can also understand that other people perceive the world differently than we do. And that's an important part of what makes humans as well, right? The fact that we have a perspective, we have a way of seeing things, but also we can understand that others have a different perspective. And that's in part that's called theory of mind, right? The idea that you're having a different experience from me, that you know things that I don't. Yeah, that's an important uh, aspect of being human, but also a milestone of human development. And so, some of you, if you if you spend time around little children, sometimes when they're quite young, you'll see that they haven't quite developed this idea, this sort of theory of mind. And so, if they for example, if they do something wrong and you don't know anything about it, they think you know because they know. And so if they know, you must know. But of course, they don't, they're too young and they don't realize that, you know, what you know and what I know could be different things. Sukhjinder says we can think about our own thoughts. Yeah, that's the fancy pants word that you want there is metacognition, right? So we can actually think about our thinking, right? We can explore ideas, and then we can see whether we're exploring those ideas in a logical way or a critical way, right? Other animals don't really have the ability to do that, right? Even if they can think thoughts, they can't really think about their thoughts. Uh, Aryan here says the ability to communicate, right? And so properly is an interesting word, but the ability to communicate. And so lots, lots of species can communicate with each other and they can communicate with other species. So that's not unique to us, but certainly the way we communicate is super unique, right? The fact that we have a full abstract language and we can communicate to each other almost anything we want, right? Most animals can't do that, right? They can send very simple messages to one another, but I can take something that's in my head and I can transmit it to you through sound, right? And it could be just a simple thought, or it could be an emotion, or it could be a story. Um, that's pretty impressive, right? And that's something that other animals can't do, right? The ability to communicate really anything, right? Anything that you can describe in words can be communicated to another human being, which is, again, incredible. Look at all these answers. This is awesome. Karan says human beings have emotions, feelings, intelligence, the ability to understand and respond. Yeah, and that's again those some of those things are present in other animals as well, right? Emotions and some degree of intelligence and to sort of respond to other animals. But I think we all kind of understand that humans can do this to a much greater degree than any other animal can, right? Our ability to sort of experience complex emotions, to communicate those emotions to others, to respond to others. You know, to some degree, other animals can do that, but we do it in a much more sophisticated way, right? And yeah, Mandeep says the same thing. We can share feelings and emotions, which is, again, not, there are other animals that do it, but nobody does it quite like humans, right? Um, Yeah, so Arshpreet says here that we don't tend to survive only, but also to try and find how different things work. Yeah, so humans are kind of, especially, living in the world we live in now, we're not simply trying to survive anymore, right? We've taken care of our basic survival needs, and we're kind of free to do other things, right? To think or to think about our thoughts, but also to invent and experiment and try to understand the nature of the world, right? That's something that other animals don't do, right? Um, the ability to reflect on our own experience is something that is, almost exclusively or exclusively human. Simranpreet says here, bring new inventions from God-gifted nature. Yeah, yeah. Most most animals are really only able to use nature as it is, right? They're able to eat food as it grows. They're able to use nature as it exists, right? But human beings are basically the only ones who can take nature and modify it into something new, right? They can create tools, right? Even if it's a simple one like this pencil, right? A very simple tool, or complex like this phone. Um, Humans have the ability to take nature and to shape it into what they need in a situation, right? They can make tools, they can modify environments. No other animal does that, right? And Annika here says humans are capable of creating, oh yeah, and using complex tools and solving problems by sense and reasoning, right? So yeah, our ability to use tools is an incredibly important part of who we are as a species, right? Human beings couldn't, we'll get to this in a couple of weeks or in a few weeks, but human beings we wouldn't be able to be what we are without our ability to make tools, or without the fact that we spent so much time in our evolution, sorry, excuse me, um, that we spent so much time during our evolution making tools. Okay, so tools and technology are a critical part of what it means to be human. And again, it's not something that other animals do. Um, in our instances, we also pay for food. Um, some people always manage to avoid that, but it's true, we do pay for food. Um, so those are all great answers. Um, they're all correct. They're all true. Um, it was interesting that there was a lot of focus on the human brain and the abilities of that brain, and I think that's reasonable. I think that's valid, right? Because again, a lot of what makes a human being comes from up there, right? Our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our ability to communicate with each other and to understand communication, all of that comes from up here, right? There are some other interesting things about us too. The fact that we walk on 2 feet is kind of a strange thing, right? In terms of animals that only get around by walking on 2 feet, that's kind of odd, right? Most animals don't do that. Most animals use 4 feet, right? So we're kind of strange that way. Um, we have very interesting hands, and we'll get to these a little bit later too, but our hands are very interesting. They are very kind of delicate and we have very fine control over them. We can do things with these hands that other animals can't do, right? Whether it's creating technology, or now we're able to type or play the piano or whatever it is. Um, these hands are an um, important part of our evolution as well. Kind says here, because we're able to use tools, human beings are able to keep records and artifacts of our surroundings and experiences through art. Yeah, that's an important thing too, and we'll come to that. The idea that our sort of ability and drive to make tools is an important part of who we are, and art is as well, right? And if I'm guessing that maybe you may have taken some art history, kind, and if you did, you'll see that um, art is tens of thousands of years old, but it's also one of the things that kind of marks kind of the official, I guess, arrival of the human species in terms of humans that are just like us, that can think and feel and do the exact same things that we can. Art has kind of an important function there as being the place that we mark that. Um, but yeah, but you're very right. Our ability to communicate experience through art is something that, yeah, no other animal can no other animal can do, right? That's a good one. Now, why do I ask you this question? Well, I asked you this question, well, because I was curious, but also I asked you this question because this is a class on anthropology, and anthropology kind of covers a lot of ground. It looks at a lot of different aspects of humans, but no matter what kind of anthropologist you are or what kind of anthropology you do, this is kind of the central question that anthropology is trying to ask. The, the central question of anthropology is, how do you describe a human? What is a human? What does it mean to be one? Where do humans come from? Why are we so different? Why are we so different from every other thing around us? Right? These are questions that anthropologists are, frequently investigating. And of course, they're asking much more specific questions about how to describe humans, right? They're specialized in one particular thing or another, but they're all trying to answer this one question. How do you describe a human? They're trying to answer the question that you all just attempted to answer. And so that kind of brings us to, yeah, what anthropology actually is. And for our purposes, this is what we'll say, okay? So anthropology is the study of human beings, okay, in all times and all places. So anthropologists are interested in humans in the past, right? Whether it's a million years ago or 30,000 years ago or 100,000 years ago or 10 years ago or right now, right? Anthropologists are interested in all of it, right? Our entire history up to the present moment. So anthropologists are interested in what humans are doing all the time, and they're also interested in what humans are doing everywhere. Okay, so whether you live in a city or whether you live in the country, whether you live, you know, 10,000 years ago in the forest or the desert or the Arctic, the jungle, wherever you live, anthropologists are interested, right? They want to understand and describe that experience. The other thing we could say is that anthropology studies humans as biological and social and cultural beings in the present and in the past. And the reason I kind of phrase it that way is because anthropology is actually divided into four kind of categories or four subfields or subdivisions. And these are what they are. The reason that anthropology is kind of divided up in this way is that, if you try to think about, if you're an anthropologist and you want to describe humans and you're going to study, all humans in all times, in all places, everywhere, and everything, it's too much, right? We're just too complicated to study all of that stuff at the same time, right? It's a ridiculous amount to study. And so anthropologists kind of section out anthropology into four different subfields. Sometimes there's five. The book will talk about a fifth one. Um, it kind of depends on what university you go to. They'll divide it differently. But the four major ones are these, okay? So the first one is physical or biological anthropology. I'll talk about it in a second. Social or cultural anthropology is the second one. Archaeology, and then linguistic anthropology. Okay, so it's kind of divided into four subfields. And again, that's because studying everything about humans in all times and places is just too much, right? It's way too much. So the first one here, biological anthropology, is the study of humans as biological organisms. Okay. I'm just going to pause for a second here. Normally, I would give you a break around now because we're about halfway through the class, but it's going to be a shorter class than today, or than normal. So I'm just going to push through, and then we'll finish early rather than taking a break. So if you're feeling a little bit exhausted and you need a break, I feel you. I need a break too, but I'm going to push through, and because we're going to finish a bit early anyway. Okay. So. The first field of anthropology is biological anthropology. It's the study of humans as biological organisms. Okay, so biological or physical anthropologists are interested in human bodies. Okay, so how they work, how they evolve, how they're built and how they function, how they're injured or how they get sick. Um, when someone dies and their body starts to decompose and rot and fall apart, anthropologists are interested in that. I know it sounds gross, but it's true. Um, Anthropologists are interested in how people think about the body, right? So, how different cultures envision the body, how they think about it working. That's interesting to biological anthropologists as well. So, anything to do with our physical body or our kind of role as a biological organism, um, biological or physical anthropologists are interested. Some biological or physical anthropologists are what are called paleoanthropologists. Paleo is from the Greek word for old. Anthro is actually for is the Greek word for man, and logos is the Greek word for the manner or the way. So in this case, anthropology is the way of man, the way of humans. And paleoanthropology is the way of old humans, in Greek anyway. So paleoanthropologists here, they're a type of physical anthropologist, and they're interested in our evolution. And so here you can see there's quite a number of different creatures before us. Um, these are, according to paleoanthropologists, these are creatures that lived before us, right? And so you can see there on the bottom right, there's Homo sapiens, there's us, we're still around, but all these other species are extinct and they came before us um, tens or hundreds of thousands of years ago, or in some cases, millions of years ago. Some of these creatures are kind of in our family tree, much further back. Some of them are not. Some of them are kind of on a parallel tree beside us. But they're kind of part of the story of human evolution. And we'll talk about that in a few weeks and meet some of these characters and try to learn what they were like. It's a very interesting story. But again, paleoanthropologists are interested in this kind of human evolution stuff. Yes, our great ancestors for sure. Um, some paleo, some physical or biological anthropologists are primatologists, and so primatologists study our closest relatives, other primates, and based on what they learn about other primates, they can apply it to humans and see what can we learn about a human being based on our closest relatives, primates. And so in the picture here, you may or may not know this woman. Her name is Jane Goodall. Jane was a researcher. She studied chimpanzees for decades and decades. I think she mostly worked in Tanzania, but don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. Um, Jane is an old lady now. This picture is probably from the 1970s or so. Um, but yeah, here she is, reaching out to a little baby chimpanzee, right? Pretty cute. Um, but also an animal that shares over 90%, 98% of its DNA with us, right? So if you're looking at other living things on the planet, there's really nothing quite so similar to us as little creatures like this, right? And obviously they're very different from us, but there are some fascinating things to be learned from looking at their world and how they work, and then comparing it to our world and how we work. But we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go forward. The other thing that physical or biological anthropologists are interested in are genetic studies. And so, one of the kind of bigger things to come out of the studies of genetics is the study of mitochondrial DNA. And so, for those of you who have taken biology before, you'll know that a mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. um, which is really interesting because it doesn't really matter where you study biology or what country you come from. Everybody seems to think of the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell. So it's a kind of a cross-cultural teaching, I guess. Um, but those little mitochondria in our cells, they have their own set of DNA, interestingly enough. And so when researchers looked at um, that mitochondrial DNA and look at the mutations, the changes in those DNA strands over time, it allows them to figure out how long it's been since a group of humans separated into two groups. Okay, and I'm massively simplifying this. It's a very complicated thing to do, but based on looking at those changes, those mutations, um, geneticists and anthropologists have been able to map out how and when human beings left Africa. And so, again, I'm jumping ahead on the story a little bit here, but as we'll talk about, humans evolve in Africa. We kind of become who we are in Africa. And then we start to slowly spread out into the rest of the world over a period of probably 70,000 years or so, give or take. And mitochondrial DNA has allowed us to make some estimations about how and when that happened, right? So based on the number of changes between different populations on the map here, we can make some estimations of how long it took for people to leave Africa and arrive in Europe, let's say, or in Southeast Asia or in Asia. Okay. Um, so yeah, genetic studies are also part of physical anthropologists' work. The third one I mentioned here is archaeology. Okay, I skipped over number two. I'll come back to it. The third one here is archaeology, and this is the study of past cultural behavior. So archaeologists are looking at what humans did, but they're looking at it in the past. And so often you'll see archaeologists doing this kind of work here, which is much more exciting, but just as dirty as it looks here in the picture. It looks like they're in a city park, but they're excavating, right? They're looking for the remains of human behavior. And so, um, this can be, in Hollywood, archaeology is a very sexy thing. You'll see, Laura Croft, Tomb Raider, and movies like this where archaeologists are, running through jungles looking for statues and things like that. In real life, it's rather, it can be a little more boring. It's a lot of digging in the dirt. And often what you're looking for, and I'm sorry if I'm spoiling this for you, but often what you're looking for is people's garbage. Um, the remains of past cultural behavior is often what people leave behind. And so archaeologists often are looking for the things that people leave behind. And it doesn't sound, super exciting, but if you think about it, if somebody went through your garbage, so if someone, went behind your house or your apartment and collected all of your garbage for 2 weeks, I know that's kind of gross, but and then they tore open all the bags and spread it out on the floor and started to organize it, I think you can see that they'd actually learn a lot about your life, right? They might learn about what kind of things you're interested in, what kind of foods you're eating, maybe what kind of foods you're not eating because you keep throwing them out because they go bad. Um, people could learn a lot from you by looking through your garbage, and this is what archaeologists do. They look through the garbage of people that lived hundreds or thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years ago to try and figure out what they were doing, right? What kind of activities were they involved in? If you're lucky as an or as an archaeologist, sometimes you'll actually get to work with human burials, human remains. And here you can see that we can learn all kinds of different things, right? So again, this isn't garbage. This is these people were intentionally buried here after they died. But we can tell all kinds of things about um, people's health, about what they ate, about how they used their bodies, whether they were healthy or not, how long did they live before they died, um, what was their funeral custom, right? Maybe some of the things they believed we could think about based on what they put in the grave. And so, garbage has a lot to offer in terms of knowledge, but so does things that are intentionally created, right? And a burial or a grave is something that people in the past intentionally create. So here you can see some archaeology students slowly and carefully excavating a grave with a number of people in it, right? Like you can see an adult toward the top of the image, you can see an adult lying there. And then in the middle of the image, you can see some children, right? So there, it looks like an older child on the left, a younger child on the right. And then it looks like there's a small baby just on the far left there. And you almost can't see because the bones of an infant are kind of so small and brittle that they don't tend to survive. But there's about 4 people in that grave at least. And so there's a lot of information to be learned about how these people lived their lives, what they ate, where they went, how they died, how they used their bodies. Um, Burials are really kind of rich sources of information. The last one here is linguistic anthropology. Um, Not the last one, sorry. Second last one is linguistic anthropology. And so one of the things that came up when I asked you about what a human was the idea that, oh, we communicate with each other, right? We have a language that allows us to communicate thoughts and feelings and emotions. And that's exactly what linguistic anthropologists study. They study how human language works, how it's put together, how it evolves, how we use it to communicate meaning and to transmit culture. All of that are things that linguistic anthropologists like to do. And so, um, if you know how this works, I don't know if there's any Game of Thrones fans here, there may not be, um, but you see people using the kinds of tools that linguistic anthropologists use, not in order to analyze human languages, but sometimes to actually create new fictional languages. And so Game of Thrones here is a good example. It's a pretty good TV series. Uh, indeed, indeed it is. Indeed it is, my friend. Um, yeah, so the show here, Game of Thrones, it's a good show. 6 seasons, I think, or 7. It's pretty good. But one of the things that they did in this television series was they created 2 or 3 fictional languages. So languages that don't exist in real life, but they do exist in this sort of fantasy world. And they were able to do this convincingly. I had a video on this, which I won't show you right now, but they do this convincingly by figuring out the sort of very basic rules about how human languages work. And that's the thing that linguistic anthropologists do. And again, if you know the rules, then you can create your own language in a way that it will actually function like a real language and it's not just kind of babbling sounds. And again, for Game of Thrones, it's 8, all right, 8 seasons. Um, they can actually create languages that are legitimate. They work like real languages. They have vocabulary, they have grammar, they have syntax. It's all there. And so even though they've just invented it for the show, it's real. Like it works like a real language, which is pretty amazing. One of the other things that linguistic anthropologists have done is they use their tools to try to figure out how closely languages are related to one another. And the way they kind of do this is that they assemble lists of words, simple words like mother, father, mountain, horse, water, river, things like that, very simple words. And then they compare those words in different languages. And often what you see is that there are similarities between these words. And it suggests that many languages have kind of a, they have common ancestor languages. They have parent or grandparent languages further back in their family tree. And so, based on this, linguistic anthropologists have identified a language that they're calling Indo-European. And so, we don't really know what this language was like. We think that it was spoken kind of in this area of the world here in the Caucasus, sort of to the east of Turkey and kind of around Mesopotamia. And sadly, Sukhjinder, I do not have the skills to be able to do that, but I admire the thought. Um, I admire the thought actually. Right. So they were able to determine that there probably was this language that existed in this part of the world here thousands of years ago. And what happened is that as people kind of left that part of the world and spread throughout Asia and um, Eastern Europe, and even all the way into India, that the, that Indo-European language kind of continued to evolve separate from the original kind of mother language. And so what they found, and this might be a little small on your screen, but what they found is that all of the languages that you see here on this kind of family tree are actually related to this earlier Indo-European language. And so you can see there's a Slavic branch. So many languages from Eastern Europe are found in this kind of language family. And then you can see here there's an Indo-Iranian section as well. And so the Indic languages, Sanskrit, and sort of the languages that evolved from it, Punjabi, Bengali, Urdu, etc. And then the Iranian languages, Persian, um, and some of the others. Those languages kind of evolved from older languages that came before, right? And so basically, because they've compared these languages and how the words are structured and how the grammar works, they were able to kind of trace back and identify that, all of these languages have a great, 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 great grandparent language somewhere in the past. And we don't really know when that language was spoken. We don't really know what the language was like, but we do know that it kind of gave birth to all of these other languages in the hundreds or thousands of years that followed. And so, I think prior to this class, most of you wouldn't have thought that Polish and Bengali were related languages, but in a very distant kind of way, they actually they are, right? They're not as closely, Bengali and Polish are not as similar to each other as say Polish and Czech or Bengali and Hindi, but there are some similarities, right? And so it's pretty interesting that anthropologists have been able to kind of trace this history back just through the way that languages work, right? And the way their vocabulary is. Okay, and the last one here is sociocultural anthropology. And so this is the this is the type of anthropology that we'll probably spend most of our time on in this class, I believe. And what it studies is the cultural behavior of humans in cultures that you can actually go visit. Okay, so it's not really looking into the past. It's not looking into biology. It's not looking into language. It's looking into how human cultures operate. Okay, and the way that the way that anthropologists kind of go about studying this is through something called participant observation. Okay, so um, Well, one of these guys is an anthropologist. I'll give you 10 points if you can figure out who it is. Um, the anthropologist in this picture is Branislaw Malinowski, and Branislaw is an anthropologist that's working in the very early 1900s. He worked in a place called the Trobriand Islands, which are just, it's kind of around Australia. It's north of the island of New Guinea and kind of Indonesia area. Um, it's kind of a funny story. He actually got stuck there. He went to that part of the world for another reason, and then World War One broke out, and he couldn't go back to. He's from Austria. He wasn't allowed to go back to Austria because the British controlled that area of the world. So he was kind of stuck in in New Guinea, and so he went to the Trobriand Islands and decided to do some scientific work. And what he went about doing was trying to document the culture of the Trobriand Islanders, who you see seated around Branislaw here. And so what he did was he went to their island, he learned their language, he ate their food and lived in their houses, made friends, and talked with them and asked them questions about their way of life and their beliefs and why do they do things this way and what is this and what does this mean, what do you believe about this, and he asked them all kinds of questions to try to document their culture from the inside. Okay, and prior to Malinowski and a few others, anthropologists like to kind of talk about human cultures by sitting at home and reading. And so they'd sit at home and they'd read the accounts of explorers and traders, and then they would describe, the cultures that the explorers met, and they would analyze them. And anthropologists like Branislaw Malinowski here, he said, that's ridiculous. You can't do that, right? You can't analyze a culture sitting in your armchair. You need to actually go there. You need to be a participant. You need to learn the language. You need to live with these people to understand who they are and what they believe. And so Branislaw Malinowski here and a few other kind of early anthropologists started this trend um, of participant observation, and it kind of continues to today. Here's an anthropologist. I don't know who this is, unfortunately. I apologize. Um, but here she is doing some anthropological field work. She's sitting down in the culture that she's chosen to study. She's sitting down with these women. I imagine she speaks some of the language, and she's going to talk, right? She's going to ask them questions about why why they believe what they believe and why they do what they do. What are their myths and stories, right? And this kind of stuff has to come from the inside. It can't come from, you know, sitting and reading about things second or third hand. So, whew, that was a bit of a marathon for me, not having not having taught for several weeks. Um, I'm going to press pause there and just see. I think that's about all I want to cover today. But before we do anything, I just wanted to check in with people, see if they had any questions, any concerns. Um, yeah, anything I can answer for you. Looks like my ears are glowing here. They're really not. There's this big, strong light up there. Also, it, because of the lights here, it looks like there's these like rays coming down, like God is blessing me or something, but it's just the light. Don't worry. That only happens when I'm outside. Um, any questions, my friends? Questions, concerns? Are we going to get the slide notes? Yes. Sukhjinder, slide notes are, they will be posted on Moodle. Um, they will be, they will be posted on Moodle. Yeah, so no problem there. Thank you. I do look kind of holy. Again, it's just a light, don't worry. Um, Maya says for now it's still 2 weeks online. That is correct. Um, as I say, we're going to keep a very close eye on um, what's happening with the Omicron variant of COVID. We're going to keep a close eye on what the Ministry of Education and the government says. And, but the plan is for us to be back in the classroom on um, January 24th, which is a Monday. So I hope that will be, I hope that will happen. But the best thing we can do is just try to keep ourselves healthy, wear our masks. If you're not vaccinated, I would suggest that you do that because that will protect you and it'll protect others. But yeah, that's the plan. Um, anything else? Anything else, my friends? Okay, well, maybe that's I think enough for today. I meant to finish a little bit earlier than this, but that's okay. Um, so it was lovely to meet you all. Well, I didn't really meet you, but we'll get there. Um, it's lovely to have you all here. Thank you for participating so much in the live chat. That was great. Um, if you have any questions or concerns, you can email me or message me. As I say, I'll post the YouTube live streams take about the YouTube live streams take about um, 12 hours or so to upload, so you won't see this pop up there until then. Um, the lecture notes I'll add to Moodle as soon as I figure out how to do it. Um, but yeah, that's what will happen. And otherwise, I guess I'll see you all on Friday. Okay. So that is it. Go and enjoy the rest of your afternoon if you can. Stay safe, wear your mask, um, take care of your health, and yeah, and we'll see you all Friday. Okay. Okay. Very welcome. Very welcome. See you next time, guys.